Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Respected dignitaries and my dear delegates, on hand of the TAS and dear audience. My paper is going through 3 points where Suhail Nursi's teachings in psychological aspects, and then reasoning and intelligence, Suhail Nursi's methodology, and Risale-i Nur, the book of humanistic guidance. And the core point of this paper is to focus on whether the doctrines of Suhail Nursi and the methodology of Risale-i Nur is psychologically applicable for the education system or the ethical character formation or not. And we can see the introduction, model and traditional education systems. We can see the doctrine of the discourse of psychology was widely engaged with the ethical characters and modern education systems, and we can see there are psychology in the school psychology and ethical psychology and various aspects of psychological doctrines, and we have focusing how psychologically can read Risale-i Nur and the methodology of Suhail Nursi, and the role of spiritual education in constructing ethical and humanitarian concepts. How the ethical education and the spiritual education is vibrant, and spiritual education is relevant in the modern education system. That we are focusing on that point. And then disciplines of psychology and education system, how Risale-i Nur can be contributed as a guide and character syllabus. We can see the doctrines of Nursi through Risale-i Nur is very understanding of education and ethics. How can we form the ethical character applicable for a spiritual context of religion, and this point will focus on that context. And then the text as a guide and teacher for a humanistic personal life. Through this ethical education and the spiritual life, how can we involve in an education system through the text as a guideline for this formation of character? And why the features regarding the Suhail Nursi and the Risale-i Nur is relevant. We can see the fortunate amalgamation of wisdom, purity and renaissance is the most salient feature of Suhail Nursi among his contemporaries. And personal identity, who restored the values and immensities of the human existence and satisfied the human starvation for spirituality. During the course of Turkey, the Suhail Nursi and the Risale-i Nur contributed more for the spirituality and ethical contributions to the context of Turkey in that period. And then the vital role in the construction of ethical and humanitarian concepts. How humanitarian concepts and ethical concepts formed by the Risale-i Nur for the readers and the followers of Suhail Nursi. And the touch of divine glory in doctrines and teachings of Suhail Nursi. The touch of divinity as a commentary for Quran. The spiritual and the ethical character of Suhail Nursi and the Risale-i Nur is more vibrant for the divine glory in the doctrines and teachings of Suhail Nursi. And then what is the connection between psychology and the doctrines of Suhail Nursi? We can see every society is dealing with issues of preparing the child to be an intellectual citizen. How to prepare the child for a good adult and an intellectual citizen. And we can see the dictums, the text and the most vibrant dignitaries of the period have a more focus on the character formation and education system of a student or a child. And this child, through his readings through the text and dictums of this Risale-i Nur and the Suhail Nursi, can form a good adult. He can become a good citizen and an intellectual adult through the readings and teachings of Suhail Nursi and the Risale-i Nur. And the children, this requires the ability to think beyond the actual to the possible through the use of imagination and cognitive work. The Risale-i Nur and the Suhail Nursi, his doctrines are more imaginative and more systematic in the methodology to become an adult, to become a child to the adulthood with an intellectual aspect of his life. And then the famous psychologist Liu and Noah Brandon makes an excellent point that the use of imagination is the first step towards developing creative solutions to seemingly intractable challenges. So the Suhail Nursi's this type of imagination and building imagination through Risale-i Nur by his arguments and by his methodology is a good deal with the psychology to become a good adult in the adult citizen. And how can we psychological perspectively look upon the doctrines of Suhail Nursi? We can see the conditioned behavior of young thugs to blindly imitate Western culture, denying their own tradition, was the going condition when Risale-i Nur and Suhail Nursi came into being practicable in the Turkish context. And many of the behaviors that to perform each day requires little conscious efforts on our own part. That means psychology says that the many of the behaviors that to perform each day requires little conscious efforts in our own part. So this little conscious was provided by the Risale-i Nur to the young thugs and child of the Turkish people, and that is why the Risale-i Nur is more prominent in the context of Turkey. And then cognitive psychology also dealt with some behaviors accepted from the daily performances which can be made consciously with the stance of external bodies. That means the external body of Western context and Western thoughts over the Turkish people was the main feature of Suhail Nursi's doctrines and teachings. When the Nursi used their thugs to build better consciousness about their culture, the destiny of their life, and the requirements for their society. And the Nursi evoked the minds of the Turkish people to live their own tradition, to live their own culture, to understand their own society and community instead of packing with the external body of Western thoughts and imaginations. And by his how this psychological perspective of Nursi was effective in the Turkish context, we can see by his motivational words and introspective deeds, other than making political or inflexible organization and all, he strengthened the roots of faith in the hearts of millions of thugs through his preachings and writings. And the fact that attracted his disciplinarians was that what he proclaimed and taught can be seen from his own character itself. It is the best quality of a leader to make good affair in the followers' view while doing as what says. It is the main feature of as a leader for the Risale-i Nur and the Suhail Nursi. This character, what psychology says, is an unconditional positive regard, which a distinctive person can only be achieved this type of character. And there had a decline of spiritual and religious values in Turkey during his period because of the interference of materialists and atheists in the name of science and development soon after the Industrial Revolution. And it was a shaped character. The shaping is a method for character formation in using in psychology and of Turkish youngsters, which is commonly causing in humans to acquire or construct new and more complex forms of behavior from simple behaviors. And thus he gave the method of chunking, which is as a sequence or a chain of responses, the last of which leads to a reward. And this Risale-i Nur is used as a chunking method of spiritually and ethically packed with the useful aspects of psychology. And it has a great implication in human behavior to form a new response instead of the previously acquired. He identified first of all what causes these social insurgencies. And the second step is to formulate potential solutions which require for that problem. The method of Suhail Nursi was first to identify the problem and then to seek solutions for that problem. As far as the methodology of Suhail Nursi is concerned, he identifies the problem first, then gives the logical as well as scientific analysis respectively where needed, in accordance with the mental capacity of the follower or the reader of the Risale-i Nur. For attaining his desired goals regarding religious and social reconstruction of the age, Nursi clearly adopted, even without a master knowledge in the discourse of psychology, the problem-solving method, which is the most relevant task in the cognitive process of human being. That means we have seen there are more psychological teachings now available in school psychology, learning psychology, and textual psychology, and so on. But before this coming of development of psychological doctrines, Suhail Nursi, without learning any psychological aspects of his this material education, he applied the problem-solving method in his books and psychology. That is the relevant feature of Suhail Nursi in his text and his doctrines and teachings. And the first step is problem identification, to recognize that a problem exists, and then figure out just what issues, obstacles, and goals are involved for this problem to be solved. When Tud's attitude aroused the passion of antagonism and grew hostile towards the Arabs and their religion, he identified first of all what causes these social insurgencies, and then he seeks the solution for overwhelming these insurgencies and social crises. And there is another point of view, reasoning and intelligence methods of Nursi's teachings. How reasoning and intelligence was the method used for the Nursi's teachings. For exploring the reality and following the style of Quran, Suhail Nursi approached logical reasoning as psychology interpreted that the logical reasoning. In psychology, reasoning often involves the use of certain principles of logic. He clearly articulates the obstacles and problems of the civilization in general and then the Islam in particular. The obstacles are first, Europeans' ignorance; second, the barbarity at that time; the third, their bigotry; fourth, domination of clergy and Europeans' blind obedience towards them; sixth and seventh, which related to Muslims, are despotism and degeneracy that arose from opposing the laws; and the eighth is the contradiction between the science and outer meaning of Islam. It is very clearly proclaimed in the Risale-i Nur as well as in the books of the teachings of Suhail Nursi. For these gradually ordered obstacles, he makes remedies very logically and intelligently, whereas for the first three obstacles remedies by virtues, knowledge and civilization, the fourth and fifth by idea of freedom and desire to search for truth, and so on forth. The methodology adopted by Nursi is involved in cognitive psychology, which invokes human intellect. He talks primarily on the problems and remedies it with significant solutions to overcome the problems and to improve the society by his teachings and doctrines. The methodology adopted by Nursi is involved in cognitive psychology, which invokes human intellect. During the condition of stress and high tension in the society of Turkey, despite managing these in a pessimistic manner, Nursi's approach was quite optimistic, and he tried to make the active intellect and active society by his teachings and intellectual, by packing the motivation and inspiration to the society. And this, how can be Risale-i Nur can be read in a humanistic guidance as a psychology proclaims. Occasionally, as Badi Saman Suhail Nursi guided the whole humanity with his psychological teachings and trajectory words. His greatest written contributions, which are contrasted as Risale-i Nur, also contributes much revolutionary seeds to the humanity. How we can see that? For awakening the Muslims' rationality and rehabilitating what they lose from their glorious civilization, Risale-i Nur acts as an intermediary between reader's mind and Suhail Nursi's thoughts. It is a intermediary between the Nursi's thoughts and the reader's or follower's mind. It's bridging a connection between the reader's mind and Risale-i Nursi's thoughts. And we can see it gives extreme pleasure and optimistic mindset to the readers and creates hope for the Muslims and causes high definitions of motivation and spirituality for the young Turks. Another silent feature of the methodology of Risale-i Nur is its allegorical methodology. It conveys its message through instances and examples of surroundings, comparison, simple stories and similar narrations. We can see the starting of flashes with a desert, and a passenger is passing through the desert, and he narrates tribal people and the modern people and so on. Is this used as allegorical methodology in psychology? One of his collections, the word starts the metaphoric narrative style of the book is very much attractive from the reader to perceive the semantics of the words and thereby appropriating to access the virtue and the morality that implied in the book. Risale-i Nur, instead as a text of legendary outcome, it acts further as a motivational and guiding collection of dictums which powered the seeds of revolutionary and ethical aspects of a human through active intellectual and logical methods. And we can conclude the session. For the ethical development and especially the moral enactment, some driving forces should be existed. That means some dictums or independent personality and so on. Is the history of word that revolutionaries and social revivalists came forward in every community and nation to ideologically make the people in virtue and the whole society in humanitarian values, even under religious background or not. Among these reconstruction figures and their exemplary contributions, Badi'uz-Zaman Suhail Nursi and his dictums remains as a social motive for learning, goodness and ethical character formation of the students or the readers or the followers. And his techniques are unique in nature, which strikes the human intellect and cognitive process provoking as well. Suhail Nursi, his words and writings with logical and analytical ability opens new horizons for psychological paradigms in pedagogy of learning and character formation. He convincingly changes the mindset of the people from despair to hope, from lying to truthfulness, from the enmity to love for brotherhood, and from individual interest to communal interest. And he provides for the entire humanity a method and technique of integrated form of religion, science and logic, which is more seemed in the world of post-modernity, and most importantly to act in the direction which is more practical in nature and appeals human mind, especially a man of modern context and modern thoughts. And hereby we can see the psychological doctrines of say Nursi and the Risale-i Nur is more applicable in the field of psychological education and also in the ethical character formation of students, and as well as these followers and readers of Risale-i Nur. By these words, let me conclude, step aside this dictum. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum.